The Group 10 reporters will be Tabal, Tumulak, Ugbamen, Villamor, and Zaspa.
Good day everyone, I am Shered Tabal from Group 10 and we are going to discuss about outcome-based education. So what is outcome-based education? Is it more beneficial for students? Should learning in educational institutions be outcome-based? At present, outcome-based education or the OBE system is being widely used by leading institutions across the world. Many of the educators have developed a curiosity to understand the reason behind the ongoing learning transformation. Well, the reason is outcome-based education is a student-centric educational model that maps and measures students' performance on every step. The OBE model aims to maximize students' learning outcomes by developing their knowledge and skills. So what is exactly meant by outcome-based education? Outcome-based education or OBE is a process of curriculum design, teaching, learning, and assessment that focuses on what students can actually do after they are being taught. It is an approach that focuses and organizes the educational system around what is essential for all learners to know, value, and to do achieve a desired level of competence. Outcome-based education also referred to a standard-based education, and it has proven to be a success in helping institutions measure their learning outcomes and at the same time enabling students to develop new skills that prepare them to stand out with their global counterparts. It is a model of education that rejects the traditional focus on what the school provides to students in favor of making students demonstrate that they know and able to do whatever the required outcomes are. These reforms emphasize setting clear standards for observable, measurable outcomes. And to dig deeper into the topic, I will give now the virtual mic to Ms. Tumulak. Thank you and have a nice day, everyone.
Principles of Outcome-Based Education by Spadi 1993. First, clarity of focus. Learners are certain about their goals and are always given significant and culminating exit outcomes. This first principle requires instructors to make deliberate, informed choices when designing instruction in order to facilitate students' achievement of the intended learning outcomes. Second, designing backwards. Using the major learning outcomes as the focus and linking all planning, teaching, and assessment decision directly to these outcomes. This second principle is based on Spadi's first premise that while all learners can be successful, they may require different instructional strategies and additional learning opportunities in order to do so. Because most students can achieve high standards if they are given appropriate opportunities. And this second principle is actually linked to the third principle, which is consistent high expectations of success. We're in helping students to succeed by providing them encouragement to engage deeply with the issues they are learning and to achieve the set of high challenging standard. So according to which, success reinforces prior learning, heightens self-confidence, and provides motivation. The fourth one, which is the last, is expanded opportunity. Developing curriculum that allows every learner to progress in his or her own pace and that caters to individual needs and differences. Finally, according to the last principle, the instructor begins by identifying the exit outcomes, followed by the building blocks of learning that enable students to achieve this. So in order for an educational system to be described as outcome-based, these four principles must provide its philosophical foundation. To implement outcome-based education in the subject or course level, the following procedure is recommended. First, identification of the educational objectives of the subject or course. Educational objectives are the broad goals that the subject or course expects to achieve, and defining in general terms the knowledge, skills, and attitude that the teacher will help the students to attain.
The objectives are stated from the point of view of the teacher, such as to develop, to provide, to enhance, and to inculcate. Second, listing of learning outcomes specified for each subject or course objective. Since subject or course objective are broadly stated, they do not provide detailed guide to be teachable and measurable. Learning outcomes are stated as concrete active verbs such as to demonstrate, to explain, to differentiate, and to illustrate. A good source of learning outcome statement is the Taxonomy of Educational Objectives by Benjamin Bloom, which is actually grouped into three. First is cognitive. This is also called knowledge or refers to mental skills such as remembering, analyzing, understanding, applying, evaluating, synthesizing, or creating. Second is a psychomotor, also referred to as skills, includes manual or physical skills, which proceed from mental activities and range from the simplest to the complex, such as observing, imitating, practicing, adapting, and innovating. And the third and last, Bloom's taxonomy of educational objective, is affective. This is also known as attitude that refers to growth in feelings or emotions from the simplest behavior to the most complex, such as receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and internalizing. And the third and last procedure to implement outcome-based education on the subject or course is drafting outcomes assessment procedure. This procedure will enable the teacher to determine the degree to which the students are attaining the desired learning outcomes. It identifies for every outcome the data that will be gathered, which will be guide the selection of the assessment tools to be used and at what point assessment will be done.
Good morning once again, everyone. So the part 1 of my discussion will be about the outcomes-based education, matching intentions with accomplishment. So the change in educational perspective is called outcomes-based education, or the OBE, which has 3 characteristics. The first one is that it is student-centered. So it places the students at the center of the process by focusing on student learning outcomes, or the SLO. The second one is that it is faculty-driven. That is, it encourages faculty responsibility for teaching, assessing program outcomes, and motivating participation from the students. And the third characteristic is that it is meaningful, because it provides data to guide the teacher in making valid and continuing improvement in instruction and assessment activities. The next one will be the outcomes of education. So the outcomes-based education focuses classroom instruction on the skills and competencies that students must demonstrate when they exit. So there are 2 types of outcomes. We have the immediate and the deferred outcomes. So when we talk about immediate outcomes, these are competencies or skills acquired upon completion of a subject, a grade level, a segment of the program, or the program itself. So examples for this one are the ability to communicate in writing and speaking. We have the mathematical problem-solving skill in storytelling, ability to do research and write the results. And as for the different outcomes, it refers to the ability to apply cognitive, psychomotor, and affective skills or competencies in various situations many years after completion of a subject, grade level, or degree program. Examples for this one are success in professional practice or occupation, promotion in a job, awards and recognition, success in career planning, health and wellness. So basically, these are referred to as the institutional outcomes, which will be discussed next to this. So, moving on, in OBE, learning outcomes are constructively aligned in a learning program. So, for the first one is the institutional intended learning outcomes, or the IILO. So it is what the graduates of the university or college are supposed to be able to do beyond graduation. So institutional outcomes are statements of what the graduates of an educational institution are supposed to do beyond graduation, such as in our university. They are monitoring whether graduate students were able to land on jobs and such. Institutional learning outcomes are the knowledge, skills, and abilities, attitudes that students are expected to develop as a result of their overall experiences with any aspect of the college, including courses, programs, and student services. ILOs are designed to help guide individual departments and disciplines in the development of learning outcomes for programs and courses and services, and to help shape the decision-making processes. So here's an example for that. So here is the University of Cebu's institutional outcomes. One is to demonstrate skills and competence in one's educational level and field of discipline for lifelong learning. Second, express proficiency in both oral and written communication. Third, demonstrate social accountability and ethical responsibility towards the community and the environment. Fourth, exhibit proactive and collaborative attributes in a diverse society. Fifth, utilize appropriate technology. And the sixth one will be the manifest ethical behavior in diverse situation. So this is an example of an institutional learning outcome. So the next one is the program intended learning outcome, or the PILO. It is what the graduates from a particular degree or program should be able to do at the completion of the degree. So for instance, after a completion of a degree or after graduation, graduate of education were monitored by the school if they passed the board exam or landed jobs, etc. So program outcomes examine what a program or process is to do, achieve, or accomplish for its own improvement and or in support of institutional or divisional goals. General numbers, needs, or satisfaction driven. They can address quality, quantity, fiscal sustainability, facilities, and infrastructure or growth. So here's an example. This is the CTA BS Ed program outcomes. The Bachelor of Secondary Education aims to produce graduates who can first articulate the rootedness of education in philosophical, social-cultural, historical, psychological, and political context. Second, demonstrate mastery of subject matter or discipline. Third, facilitate learning using a wide range of teaching methodologies and delivery modes appropriate to specific learners and their environments. Fourth, develop innovative curricula, instructional plans, teaching approaches, and resources for diverse learners. Next is apply skills in the development and utilization of ICT to promote quality, relevant, and sustainable educational practices. Demonstrate a variety of thinking skills in planning, monitoring, assessing, and reporting learning processes and outcomes. Practice professional and ethical teaching standards sensitive to the local, national, and global realities, and pursue lifelong learning for personal and professional growth through varied experiential and field-based opportunities. So the next one will be the course intended learning outcomes, or the CILO. This is what students should be able to do at the completion of a given course or subject. So course intended learning outcomes identify how students may demonstrate achievement by the end of the course, according to predetermined standards of performance and content. So they should be made explicit to learners and must guide the teaching, learning, and assessment activities in the context of a course. So therefore, it could be inferred that course intended learning outcomes, or the CILO, is likely changes that exist at the end of the learning process. So it is what a learner is expected to know, understand, and or be able to demonstrate after completion of a process of learning. Say for example, here's a course intended learning outcomes for the subject meteorology. So by the end of the course, you should be able to first course intended learning outcome will be develop knowledge and understanding of the planet Earth's atmospheric phenomena. Second, acquire and develop reasoning skills in the concept of atmospheric effects on our weather. Third is show appreciation on the significance of meteorology in everyday life. And fourth is to demonstrate content knowledge of meteorology and its application across curriculum teaching areas. So the last one will be the intended learning outcomes, or the ILO. So it refers to what students should be able to do at the completion of a unit of study of a course. So intended learning outcomes define what a learner will have acquired and will be able to do upon successfully completing their studies. ILOs should be expressed from the student's perspective and are measurable, achievable, and accessible. So here's an example. So for the content, here's the objective. By the end of this unit, students will be able to explain how the quantum mechanical model of the atom describes the energies and positions of the electrons. So for skills, here's an example. At the end of this module on volcanoes, students will illustrate how energy from volcanoes may be tapped for human use. And for the values, which is basically from the affective domain. So by the end of this course, students will be able to promote awareness of healthy lifestyle to prevent risk of heart failure and diseases. Other sources uses KSA, but for this one it uses content, skills, values. KSA stands for knowledge, skills, and attitudes, but anyway, they are just the same actually. So I think that is pretty much for my report. Thanks for listening and have a great day, everyone.
Good day everyone, my name is Kit A. Villamor and I'm going to talk about lesson plan. So first, let's define what is a lesson plan. So first, a lesson plan is a teacher's detailed description of the course of instruction or learning trajectory for a lesson. So when we say learning trajectory, this is the goals of learning. Second, a lesson plan is the activity which the teacher performs before the actual lesson takes place in order to achieve common goals. And lastly, a lesson plan is a detailed description of the instructional strategies and learning activities to be performed during the teaching or the learning process. And now let's move on to the purpose of a lesson plan. We all know that lesson plan is very vital in education, thus this is some examples or purpose of a lesson plan. So first, the main purpose of a lesson plan is to structure the lesson and organize its contents or materials. So basically, a lesson plan serves as a guide that a teacher are going to use in teaching the lesson or the curriculum. Next is to determine the method of its delivery. Like, the lesson plan are going to determine whether it is a teacher-centered, student-centered, a cooperative learning, or many ways to deliver a lesson. Basically, it aims to determine the method of its delivery. And lastly, the lesson plan assess students' learning and evaluate its application or effectiveness. Basically, a lesson plans are able to assess and evaluate its students if they are learn something during the curriculum, and also the lesson plan will be taught as well as how learning should be evaluated by the teachers. And now let's proceed to the 5 key components of a lesson plan. So there are 5 key components of a lesson plan. First, we have the objectives, the warm-up, presentation, practice, and the assessment. So first, we have the objectives. This is where you need to write what you expect your students will do by the end of the lesson. For example, your content is about in English. So example of objective is by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to pronounce, identify, put words in the sentences, and also an objective must be measurable and observable. Next, we have the warm-up. So warm-up is where you revise the previous lesson, check homework orally, correct common mistakes, but how your students learned, and also you need to put or give activity that can active students and prepare themselves to receive the new material. So next, let's move to the presentation. Presentation, this is where you present a new material using suitable techniques. This is also where you are going to write the procedures that will follow to explain the new material. And next, we have the practice. This is where the work is done by your students, whether it is controlled by you, guided by you, or you are freely give it to your students. So here in the practice, this is where your students will answer some exercises based on the material presented and the topic or the content. And lastly, we have the assessment. This is where you check whether the students learned or not according to the objectives. Here you are going to write some sentences on the board or create possible questions that you need to printed out or distribute to your students to check whether the objectives were met or not, so that you can know if you are going to reteach the lesson or moving forward to another lesson. And now let's proceed to some examples of a lesson plan. So first example of a lesson plan is the 4A's of a lesson plan, or also known as the 4A model. So now we all know that lesson plan are important part of education, and they are written plans of what a teacher will do in order to achieve the goals during a school day, week, and even a year. Typically, a lesson plan follows a format that identifies goals and objectives, teaching methods, and assessment. First, we have the active prior knowledge. This is where you let your students discuss or write what they have already know that is related to the lesson. For example, you can ask your students to create a 3-to-1 first, which means 3 things that they already know, 2 things they want to learn, and 1 thing that they are still confused. And second, we have the acquire new knowledge. This is where teaching part where the new information is presented and students should be learning or acquiring from this information. For example, you are going to provide your students YouTube video or materials for them to watch about the topic or the lesson. Next, we have the application. This is where students practice what they have learned. So, for example, after they watch the video, you can tell your students to create 2 groups and share to their groups what they have learned from the video. And after that, maybe you can tell them to share it in the whole class. And lastly, we have the assessment. This is where students are tested to see how much they have learned and determine if there are gaps in understanding. So, in assessment, you can provide tests or an oral exam. Another example of a lesson plan is the 7E's of lesson plan. So, this type of lesson plan are only used in science lessons that aim for a learner-centered approach. The 7E's of the lesson plan is first the elicit, engage, explore, explain, and execute, elaborate, and evaluate. So first, let's tackle about the elicit. So elicit, this is where you recall or asking your students about their prior knowledge about your lesson. Next, we have the engage phase. This is where you establish your lesson goals, and this is where you engage your students with an activity or questions where it captures their interest, provides an opportunity for them to express what they know about a concept or skills that being developed, and helps them to make connections between and what they know and the ideas that they might come across their way. Next, we have the explore. This is where your students carry out handouts on activities in which they can explore the concept or skills. They also grapple with the problem or phenomena and describe in their own words. And this phase allows students to acquire a common set of experiences that can use or help them in growing their sense of accepting the new concept or skills. Next, we have the explain or execute. This is where you guide your students in discussing and practicing the new skill. In this phase, the students who have already explored the concept or skills that the teacher provide, and the concept of the terms used by the students to develop explanation for the phenomena that they have experienced. And also, this phase are significant aspect in this phase, that is explanation follows experience. Next, we have the elaborate. This is where you assess your students' progress and understand the demonstration of learning. In this phase, this is where you provide opportunities for your students to apply what they have learned to new situation and to develop a deeper understanding of the concept or greater use of the skill. And it is important for the students to discuss and compare their ideas with each other during this phase. And lastly, we have the evaluate. This is where you check your students' mastery level and make generalization out of it. And this final phase provides an opportunity for students to review and reflect on their learning and new understanding and skills. And it is also when students provide evidence for the changes of their understanding, beliefs, and skills. So another common example of a lesson plan will be, as we all know, the semi-detailed and the detailed lesson plan. So first, let's tackle about what is semi-detailed lesson plan. So a semi-detailed lesson plan are less intricate than the detailed one, but they still focus on what you want to cover for that subject on that day, and they act as a general game plan for what you will go on in the lesson. While on the other hand, the detailed lesson plan covers everything and it gets teachers fully prepared for the lesson ahead. It covers to what they teach and all the activities the student will complete in that lesson. So first, let's talk about the semi-detailed lesson plan. A semi-detailed lesson plan is, if you are going to make one, it will only cost you 1-2 pages of bond paper if you are going to make it. And basically, a semi-detailed lesson plan is a brief presentation of a lesson for basically 1 hour inside a classroom. So here I'm going to present to you the basic parts of a semi-detailed lesson plan. So first part of a semi-detailed lesson plan, we have the objectives, where you are going to make at least 2 to 3 objectives that you need to meet in the lesson, and it must be catered by cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor domain. And another part is the subject matter, where you discuss all the contents or the lesson and all the materials that you are going to use, like in the example here, like pentel pen, cartolina, and everything. And next, we have the procedure. This is where the interaction between the teacher and the students will happen. Like, we have the preparation, motivation, and the lesson proper, like the greetings, attendance, reviewing, and all of that. Then we have the activity and generalization and evaluation, where you give the test. And lastly, the assignment, where you give an extension of learning to your student that they will bring to their home. And to the detailed lesson plan is still same with the semi-detailed, but as you can see the example, but in the procedure part, it's still the same, but it all have the conversation between a teacher and the students. To cut things short, detailed lesson plan focuses more on conversation and a question answer between the students and the teacher, while the semi-detailed lesson plan leaves it out to the students' activity. It's just basically the same but differ in a little way. Thank you, and now I will give the floor to the next reporter.
For the continuation, I'm Zaspa Recelle Jane, and the last topic for this group is about syllabus or course guide. Syllabus or course guide functions much like a good course syllabus, but might be even broader in the information it provides. One very good way to reduce the intimidation of a course is to provide a clear course guide or syllabus. This resource should communicate the essential information all participants need to know to succeed in their learning. Learners should be able to easily find and access the course guide at all times. Be strategic when deciding where to place the course guide or the syllabus. For example, if your course is face-to-face, then you may consider sending a copy of the guide together with the confirmation of enrollment or any hard copy material that will be given to participants. This would increase the chances of learners being already familiar with the document before meeting for the first class. For online courses and online environments of blended courses, make sure the guide or syllabus is visible in the course website and also that is provided in a format that can be easily read, printed, and saved. The following presents information that you might consider to include in a course guide or a syllabus. They are provided to you as suggestions because the information to include in the guide will depend on specific details of the course, like the delivery format, for example. As a general rule, include all information that you feel will be of help to learners taking the course. If you are re-offering a course, remember to consider questions that were already asked by learners in previous presentations. First is the welcome and introduction. You need to include a welcome message, a general description explaining what the course is about, reasons the course is relevant, interesting, or significant. and also describe how the course relates to a training program, field of work, or a curricular context, and also highlight what audience the course is most suitable for, indicating any prerequisite requirement if applicable. Second is the course goals, learning outcomes, and competencies developed. You should include presentations about course goals, list the learning outcomes of the course, if appropriate, a list of the competencies and the competency frameworks being developed by the course. Note that you may find it useful to include a short explanation about what learning outcomes are and describe any categorization of learning outcomes in case they have been grouped into different categories. Third is you need to set expectations. Expectations from learners should include a general description of required participation in activities and assessment, if it is applicable. A course schedule may be linked to information in this section. You can also highlight learners' responsibility in the learning process. You may want to highlight that attaining competencies requires work on the learner's part and that developing an independent learner attitude is important for success. You may link this to a document containing guidance for online learning studies, if it is also applicable. Guidance on how much time learners should expect to dedicate to attend the course is also included. Expectations from the course or what the learners can expect should provide a clear explanation of course support and facilitation, or who is responsible for what, including availability of support such as office hours, expected reply time for electronic communications, financial support, if it is also applicable. Includes also a support context list and netiquette and code of conduct guidelines. Fourth is the structure of the course. It includes some orientation to the course interface. Providing a course map or a list of items on the course website containing descriptions of each item is very helpful in online courses. In the case of classroom and blended courses, a list of material to be received such as DVDs and hard copies of written materials, for example, is also very helpful. Indication of how the resources should be studied. For example, should the learners have a close reading of all resources or skimming of some? And also, are there resources offered as optional study material? It also includes an overview of key assignments or activities. If the course is primarily online, include guidelines for successful online learning. It also consider providing some sort of graphic representation of the flow of the course, like the flow chart or diagram showing the sequencing of major course topics or activities. These can also be linked to the course map, showing where to find the resources to be used at each stage of the course. A review of minimum technical requirements, including tools and applications to be used in activities, is also included. Provide also a general technical guide for tools and applications to be used if it is applicable. And lastly, the course schedule is very important and should be included in the structure of the course. Fifth is the assessment. It includes a thorough description of the assessment process. It also includes a criteria for receiving a certificate, if it is also applicable. The link information to course schedule for clear statement of deadlines of the key assignments is also included in assessment. After knowing those information about how to make a course guide or a syllabus, the last one is where to start. You should explain how learners should start studying the course. Are there pre-course activities to be performed? And also, highlight the importance of reading the guidelines for success in online learning if it is applicable. You should also encourage the organizing of study groups like Community for Learners or Communities of Practice. And lastly, some motivational words of encouragement. You should use this to encourage the learners. And that's all for the topic about the syllabus or course guide. Thank you.